Watch exactly how Director Tulsi Gabbard weaponizes a single manila envelope to systematically dismantle Nancy Pelosi's political legacy on live television. Directors note the opening salvo. Director Gabbard, you are a Russian asset. You met with Assad. You betrayed our Democratic Party. You serve a fascist president who sent the National Guard against American children. You should be in prison, not subpoenaing the longest-serving speaker in modern American history. Nancy Pelosi aimed a trembling finger across the Senate hearing room, wielding the very hand that had sworn an oath on a Bible mere minutes prior. Adam Schiff sat beside her, nodding with manufactured solemnity. Tulsi Gabbard remained perfectly still, a weathered combat journal gripped in her left hand, a sealed manila envelope resting on the table before her. It was a catastrophic miscalculation by the former speaker. The ensuing 2 hours would permanently eradicate Nancy Pelosi's legacy on live C-SPAN. You are about to witness the most surgical political destruction in modern congressional history. The setting was the Hart Senate Office Building, Hearing Room 216. It was 1,000 on a Tuesday morning in April. C-SPAN broadcasted live. Fox News rolled their cameras. The observation galleries had reached capacity by 700. One half of the room sported progressive union shirts and political pins. The opposing half consisted of military veterans, Capitol Police widows, and 3 former intelligence officers who had quietly returned to service during the second Trump administration. Senator Tom Cotton anchored the center of the dais. To his left sat the primary witness table, where an 5-year-old Nancy Pelosi had just taken the oath. She wore a cream Armani pantsuit and the signature single strand of 26 pearls she had favored for 3 decades. Adam Schiff flanked her, acting as personal counsel. Tulsi Gabbard sat clad in a charcoal pantsuit, military combat boots deliberately laced beneath her trouser cuffs, and an official intelligence lapel pin. She held a small leather field journal that had survived 2 overseas deployments in her rucksack. A manila envelope bearing the official seal of the Director of National Intelligence rested near her right hand. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth sat stoically beside her. 3 weeks prior, Tulsi had officially declassified the Inspector General's files regarding the 2019 impeachment of Donald Trump. Those documents revealed that the initiating whistleblower complaint relied heavily upon secondary hearsay and politically compromised witnesses. Consequently, the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence subpoenaed Pelosi, the architect of that impeachment, and granted Tulsi full cross-examination authority. Pelosi's jaw tightened the moment Cotton uttered the phrase cross-examination. "Madam Speaker," Cotton instructed, "you may commence with your opening statement." Pelosi seized the microphone with both hands. For 9 uninterrupted minutes, she delivered a monologue utilizing the exact rhythmic cadence she had perfected over 50 years of press conferences. It was the polished delivery of a politician who fundamentally understood how to dictate the evening news cycle. However, it was also the cadence of a woman who, until this very morning, had never occupied a witness chair under the penalty of perjury. She branded Donald Trump the Mussolini of Mar-a-Lago. She labeled the Republican establishment a death cult draped in patriotic bunting. She aggressively asserted that the Department of Justice had been weaponized to target her, to target Senator Schiff, and to target any citizen who opposed the administration. She declared this era an unprecedented campaign of political retribution. Then, she pivoted slowly to confront Tulsi Gabbard, Director Gabbard. Pelosi stated, without a single blink, "I want to be unequivocally clear regarding your identity. You lack all credibility within the intelligence apparatus. You dedicated the past decade to defending Bashar al-Assad, a dictator who unleashed chemical weapons upon his own citizens. You echoed Russian propaganda regarding Ukraine so extensively that even Mitt Romney labeled you treasonous. The Senate barely pushed your confirmation through, at 52 to 48. Half of this legislative body categorizes you as a walking national security threat. Pelosi elevated one perfectly manicured finger. You conducted a clandestine meeting with Assad in 2017, completely bypassing the authorization of your party and your government. You elevated Edward Snowden, an individual who pilfered classified intelligence and sought sanctuary in Moscow. You occupied Tucker Carlson's studio couch to question the legitimacy of American biological laboratories in Ukraine. You have recited Kremlin disinformation verbatim. The finger shifted, aiming directly across the aisle. And currently, you have weaponized the office of the Director of National Intelligence. You are selectively and conveniently declassifying documents to wage war against the very democratic institutions that shielded this republic from Donald Trump in 2019. Her volume amplified, capturing her intended audience. The progressive contingent in the gallery leaned forward in unison. You are a Russian asset who fundamentally betrayed the Democratic Party. You engaged with a recognized war criminal. Your rightful place is in a prison cell. You hold no moral authority to question me here today. The American public sees through this charade. History will see through this. Adam Schiff nodded rhythmically, a motion he had sustained throughout her entire soliloquy. A sporadic eruption of applause echoed from the left flank of the gallery before Senator Cotton's heavy gavel abruptly terminated it. "Order in this room," Cotton commanded. "Director Gabbard, you may proceed with your cross-examination." Directors note the cross-examination begins. Tulsi declined to respond immediately. She analyzed the manila envelope. She analyzed Pelosi. The room held its collective breath. When she finally spoke, her vocal register was chillingly quieter than Pelosi's theatrical delivery. "Madam Speaker," Tulsi began, "I did not arrive here today to participate in a debate. I came here to read." She positioned her right hand over the envelope and deliberately fractured the wax seal. "You are about to witness the devastating collision between a soldier armed with a folder and a politician constrained by an oath." Tulsi extracted the initial photograph and placed it flat upon the witness desk. She intentionally delayed sliding it toward Pelosi, allowing the high-definition cameras to lock onto the image first. It was a police booking photograph from the Napa County Sheriff's Department in California. The subject was an 82-year-old man. His white hair was chaotically disheveled, the specific aesthetic of a man detained in the rear of a patrol cruiser at 300 inches the morning. His eyes were bloodshot. A criminal booking number stretched across his chest. The man was Paul Pelosi. Pelosi registered the image a fraction of a second before the camera operators did. Her hand instinctively drifted toward her pearl necklace, the first nervous twist. "Madam Speaker," Tulsi stated calmly, "before we delve into the 2019 impeachment proceedings, I require an answer regarding a vastly different evening, the 28th of May, 2022. Do you recall your precise location on that night?" I was currently abroad," Pelosi stammered. "Specifically where, Madam Speaker?" A micropause. "Brussels." "And what was your objective in Brussels?" "I was engaging with NATO leadership, reaffirming the American commitment to the rules-based international order." "Could you explicitly detail your dinner menu that evening, Madam Speaker?" Schiff lurched toward his microphone. "Mr. Chairman, the relevance of what the Speaker consumed for dinner." Tulsi completely ignored Schiff, keeping her eyes locked onto Pelosi. "Madam Speaker, allow me to refresh your memory. The State Department's per diem logs verify that your delegation hosted an exclusive working dinner at the Cercle Royal Gaulois. The culinary service encompassed 6 distinct courses. Champagne was poured. Elaborate toasts were delivered. The banquet concluded precisely at 1,100 Brussels time. Tulsi allowed a tactical pause. It was exactly 200 inches the afternoon in Napa, California, when your dinner adjourned. Madam Speaker, what transpired in Napa, California, while you were clinking glasses with NATO? Pelosi offered dead silence. Madam Speaker, while you raised a champagne flute alongside the Belgian foreign minister, your 2-year-old husband sat detained in the back of a California Highway Patrol vehicle. He had just been extracted from the mangled wreckage of a Porsche. The vehicle belonged to you. He was actively driving under the severe influence of alcohol. Furthermore, an unidentified passenger occupied the seat beside him. Tulsi permitted the word passenger to hang in the sterile air for 2 full seconds. The passenger was a female. The passenger was entirely unrelated to your family tree. The passenger was not listed on your congressional staff. The Napa County District Attorney's official incident report, which is a matter of unsealed public record, classifies the passenger as, and I quote verbatim, a personal companion of the suspect. End quote. The progressive quadrant of the observation gallery went absolutely silent. Madam Speaker, while you operated in Brussels championing the rules-based global order, your husband suffered an arrest in Napa, with a mysterious woman riding inside your vehicle. Pelosi's trembling fingers twisted the pearl strand twice. Director, this constitutes a deeply personal matter. My husband's complex medical situation. Medical situation, Madam Speaker? Tulsi flipped the subsequent photograph to face the ceiling. It was the unredacted police report. The exact blood alcohol concentration dominated the top margin in stark red ink 0.082, formally eclipsing the legal limit. The vehicle classification, Porsche 911. The crash coordinates the intersection of Walnut Lane and Oakville Crossroad. The timestamp 1012 inches the evening. The arresting trooper's narrative explicitly details that Paul Pelosi attempted to present a badge identifying himself as a sanctioned Department of Defense contractor. He was categorically not a Department of Defense contractor. He possessed 0 federal authorization. That badge is the precise item a desperate man produces at 300 inches the morning when attempting to evade a criminal booking. Madam Speaker, Tulsi continued smoothly, your husband attempted to flash fraudulent federal credentials at a California state trooper to bypass a drunk driving incarceration with an unknown female companion in the passenger seat. The profound silence inside the chamber belonged to an audience completely oblivious to the woman in the car detail. Pelosi's sophisticated PR machine had successfully buried that specific reality for 4 years. Utilizing relentless media pressure, legally sealed documents, and the grim reality that no mainstream journalist wanted the career risk of asking the question, Schiff mounted a second defensive attempt. Mr. Chairman, the parameters of this impeachment subpoena clearly do not authorize. Tulsi finally rotated her head to address him. Her vocal pitch remained unnervingly level. Senator Schiff, the cross-examination mandate issued by this committee, explicitly encompasses any topic pertaining to the core credibility of the sworn witness. Executing a drunk driving maneuver with a personal companion inside the family asset of a sitting House Speaker, while she simultaneously conducts international diplomacy in Brussels, speaks volumes regarding the credibility of the exact woman who orchestrated an impeachment predicated on a telephone call she never personally monitored. Sir, I suggest you instruct your client to answer the inquiry. Schiff parted his lips, rapidly closed them, and glanced at Pelosi. Pelosi actively avoided his gaze. Cotton interjected, "The objection is formally overruled. Director Gabbard, please proceed." Directors note the divergent scales of justice. Tulsi pivoted away from the salacious details of Paul Pelosi's crash. She advanced her flank. Madam Speaker, your husband ultimately received a sentence of 5 mere days inside the Napa County Jail 5 days. The maximum allowable sentence under the specific legislation you personally co-sponsored, the exact legislation you proudly signed into existence in 2007, whilst flanked by Mothers Against Drunk Driving, was 6 full months. Tulsi retrieved her third piece of evidence. A heavy construction worker residing in San Joaquin County, who suffered a conviction for a first-offense DUI in May of 2022. The identical month as your husband's infraction, served 60 hard days. The state revoked his commercial driver's license for a full calendar year. He was subsequently terminated from his position at the rendering plant. His wife initiated divorce proceedings that October. His 2 children were relocated to live with his mother in Stockton. He has not operated a commercial truck since that night. His identity resides in the public judicial archive. His name is omitted from this folder simply because he is not the individual under investigation today. The fundamental issue is that your husband served 5 days, whereas the blue-collar worker served 60. The legislative statute was entirely identical. She flattened the document against the table. Madam Speaker, illuminate this committee. What iteration of America operates with 2 divergent sets of laws? One exclusive standard for the Speaker's husband, and a vastly different standard for the man driving the commercial truck? The pearls endured their third aggressive twist. Pelosi's free hand trembled as it extended toward her water glass. The glass rattled violently in her grip. She abandoned the attempt to drink, returning the glass to the wood. I simply cannot speak to judicial sentencing decisions. That falls under prosecutorial discretion. The prosecuting attorney in Napa County, Madam Speaker, functioned as your dedicated political donor. His verified campaign financial disclosures reside directly inside this folder. He accepted $14,000 from the Pelosi for Congress war chest between the years 2016 and 2022. This occurred within the exact geographic county where your husband suffered his arrest, after he demolished his sports car. After his fingerprints were processed into their system, Pelosi squeezed her eyes shut for half a fleeting second. The broadcast cameras immortalized the flinch. Madam Speaker, the construction worker out in Stockton did not possess a multi-million-dollar political action committee. The gallery refrained from physical applause to respect the decorum of the hearing. Yet the woman sporting the Lebanon Good pin in the furthest row clamped a hand over her mouth in sheer disbelief, while the military veterans occupying the second row aggressively leaned forward in their seats. If you vividly recall when this scandal initially detonated, when Pelosi's PR apparatus successfully buried the existence of the female passenger for 4 years, while mainstream journalists remained docile, remember that reality. 4 additional folders remain sealed inside that envelope. Directors note the emerald folder, A Fortune Examined. The next one is substantially heavier. Tulsi offered 0 respite between rounds. She reached deep into the manila envelope and produced the second folder. This one colored a stark green. The official seal stamped at the apex read U.S. House of Representatives, Office of the Clerk, Financial Disclosure Reports. Madam Speaker, we shall pivot to the intriguing mathematics of how a public servant restricted to an annual salary of $174,000 successfully hoards a personal fortune, eclipsing $250 million. She opened the emerald folder. It contained 0 complex charts, 0 intricate graphs, and 0 PowerPoint slides. It held 1 solitary piece of paper, bearing 1 solitary sentence. She read it aloud. Madam Speaker, upon assuming your legislative seat within the United States Congress in 1987, your family's net worth sat at $3 million. As of today, your familial wealth fluctuates between $250 million and $400 million. The precise valuation depends heavily upon the current market appraisal of your Napa Valley winery. The quality of the silence permeating the room abruptly shifted. It transformed into the heavy silence of 300 individuals simultaneously performing mental arithmetic. Madam Speaker, enlighten this committee exactly how does that financial miracle materialize? Pelosi scrambled. My husband operates as a legitimate businessman. Paul handles venture capital, lucrative real estate. Paul Pelosi manages financial leasing services, a highly reputable San Francisco firm. The firm's primary revenue stream relies entirely upon commercial real estate and aggressive stock trading. Tulsi interjected smoothly. More specifically, highly leveraged call options targeting massive technology conglomerates. Tulsi abstained from displaying a tedious ledger of specific trades. She abstained from listing corporate ticker symbols. She simply produced a single photograph. It featured an expansive, sweeping wide shot of a pristine hillside located in the heart of Napa Valley, showcasing flawless rows of grapevines sprawling toward a picturesque sunset. Anchoring the center of the image sat a magnificent stone and redwood villa crowned with a terracotta tile roof, an architectural masterpiece destined for the cover of luxury magazines under the banner A Family's Legacy in Wine Country. This constitutes your primary residence in Street Helena, Madam Speaker. The prestigious Pelosi family vineyard, 10 sprawling acres secured in 2009. The initial purchase price rang in at $16 million. Contemporary market valuations place it closer to $30 million. She presented the secondary photograph. The camera angle was positioned roughly 12 inches above the concrete sidewalk of Market Street in San Francisco. The perspective was dramatically low because the photojournalist had been forced onto his knees to capture it. The grim image depicted a human being clad in a tattered green army field jacket, sleeping directly atop flattened cardboard boxes. His worn combat boots were arranged meticulously beside his makeshift bed. A miniature American flag had been carefully threaded through the bootlaces. It was the precise style of flag distributed during military burial services. Madam Speaker, the individual in this image is named Robert Holcomb. He is 78 years old. He bravely survived 2 combat tours in Vietnam. He was documented by an independent freelance journalist at the intersection of Market and 7th on the 18th of December, 2025, exactly 6 weeks ago. The journalist rigorously authenticated his identity utilizing Veterans Affairs databases. Mr. Holcomb has resided on the concrete of Market Street for 3 consecutive years. He sleeps roughly a 40-minute drive away from your sprawling vineyard. Tulsi arranged the 2 drastically different photographs side by side upon the polished witness table. The opulent villa, reigning above the vines, placed directly adjacent to the forgotten veteran sleeping on urban cardboard. She did not require any additional commentary. The high-definition cameras articulated the profound devastation flawlessly. The military veterans occupying the second row were no longer leaning aggressively forward. They were sitting rigidly, paralyzingly still. Madam Speaker, 6,000 human souls will sleep upon the unforgiving streets of your congressional district tonight. Your specific district maintains the absolute highest per capita homelessness metric of any congressional district within the United States. Public charitable disclosures verify that you and your husband donated a cumulative $3 million toward homeless services throughout a 8-year political career. That sum constitutes precisely 1% of your current net worth. The median American household, the exact working-class families you passionately claim to champion, donates roughly 2.1% of their wealth. The blue-collar workers residing inside your own district surrender a larger proportion of their income than you do. Schiff instinctively leaned toward his microphone to intercede. Tulsi snapped her gaze toward him before he could utter a syllable. Senator Schiff, your personal financial disclosure reports an accumulated net worth of $16 million amassed entirely on a government congressional salary. This fortune includes a $1 million estate located in Burbank, which you conveniently finalized mere months after casting a decisive vote regarding motion picture industry tax credits. Sir, I possess a dedicated folder containing your name. It currently rests inside this envelope. You are not listed on today's scheduled agenda, but if you attempt to intervene one more time, I will not hesitate to open it. Schiff immediately retreated. He did not recline in the confident manner of an attorney absorbing an overruled objection. He slumped back in the manner of a man who suddenly comprehends for the very first time in his insulated career that he is completely outmatched in the room. The gallery witnessed the surrender. The broadcast cameras captured it. Senator Cotton allowed himself a microscopic half-second of grim satisfaction before instantly suppressing his expression. Tulsi aimed her focus back at Pelosi. Madam Speaker, during your tenure in 1987, you stood upon this exact floor and declared, and I quote from your official maiden speech, "I arrived here to fight for the working families of San Francisco." End quote. She aggressively tapped the photograph depicting Robert Holcomb shivering in his army jacket on the freezing cardboard. This represents a working family, Madam Speaker. He labored intensely for 31 years as a commercial longshoreman following his return from the jungles of Vietnam. His hard-earned pension evaporated into the ether when the Longshoremen's Fund catastrophically collapsed in 2008. He has languished for 14 years, awaiting critical federal pension protection legislation. The highly anticipated Pension Protection Act of 2022, a bill designed to fully restore his stolen payments, successfully navigated the Senate by a margin of 68 to 32. It ultimately perished in the House because you, Madam Speaker, stubbornly refused to permit a floor vote. The official justification distributed by your communications apparatus at the time was, and I quote, "unavoidable scheduling conflicts stemming from end-of-session business." End quote. Tulsi calmly shut the green folder. Madam Speaker, the broken man sleeping on the cardboard embodies the working family you swore to fiercely defend. The lavish villa dominating the previous photograph represents the true priority you fought to protect instead. The pearls suffered a violent fourth twist. One singular pearl snapped loose from the delicate threading. It dangled precariously by a fragile strand of silk, swaying with a hypnotic rhythm. Pelosi completely failed to notice the structural failure. The water glass vibrated violently once more. This time she lacked the courage to even reach for it. With all due respect, Director, Paul executes those complex investment decisions. Madam Speaker, Tulsi countered with chilling quietness, Paul Pelosi holds a modest community college degree originating from the University of San Francisco. He formally retired from financial leasing services in the year 2017, yet the immensely profitable trades relentlessly continued post-retirement. The immaculate trades continued flawlessly during the excruciating months he spent recovering from a brutal hammer attack. The trades continued with psychic precision during the weeks he spent incarcerated in a county jail cell. Madam Speaker, we are left with two distinct possibilities. Either Paul Pelosi reigns as the single most brilliant savant in modern American financial history, effortlessly outperforming Warren Buffett every fiscal quarter for 15 consecutive years, while trading from a hospital bed and a jail cell, or an alternate entity is executing these highly sophisticated trades and deliberately attaching his name to the ledgers. She allowed the devastating logic to permeate the room. Madam Speaker, testify before this committee who is actually piloting the trades inside your husband's financial accounts. Pelosi provided zero answers. The suffocating silence stretched for 9 excruciating seconds. C-SPAN ruthlessly locked their primary camera directly onto her face for the entire duration. If your hands are trembling right now, If you have ever questioned how a lifelong public servant earning a standard government salary miraculously accumulates $250 million, while a Vietnam veteran sleeps on frozen cardboard inside her very own district, prepare yourself. The impending folder is the one she never saw coming. Directors, note the black folder, the shadow campaign. Tulsi selected the third folder. It was entirely black. The sleek cover remained terrifyingly unmarked. She abstained from opening it immediately. She centered it upon the table and rested her open palm directly across its surface. Madam Speaker, we must now dissect the monumental events of July 2024. More specifically, the crucial one-day window spanning between July 10th and July 21st. Pelosi's jaw muscles audibly tightened. Madam Speaker, on the 10th of July 2024, you initiated a sequence of clandestine telephone communications with elite members of the House Democratic Caucus. These discreet calls centered explicitly upon the political viability of President Joseph Robinette Biden, Jr. The conversations scrutinized whether he retained the capacity to secure victory in November. The dialogues debated whether he possessed the fortitude to remain in the presidential race at all. Exactly 11 days later, on July 21st, President Biden officially withdrew his candidacy. She flipped open the jet-black folder. Resting inside was a thick, intimidating stack of telecommunication records. She elected not to read them aloud. Madam Speaker, I have no intention of reading these extensive call logs. I refuse to recite the intercepted text messages. I will not vocalize the highly classified memos leaked from your internal political action committee. The American populace retains full permission to scrutinize those documents independently. They currently reside within the permanent official record of this legislative committee. She shoved the massive stack of papers aside, extracting one singular photograph from the very bottom of the folder. I strongly request that you examine this specific image. She slid the glossy photograph across the polished wood. Pelosi refused to physically touch it. The broadcast cameras aggressively zoomed in. The photograph radiated an antique aesthetic. The faded color palette possessed the distinct washed-out quality characteristic of 1970s film exposure. A man and a woman stood triumphantly upon the stone steps of a chapel. The man was styled in a crisp navy suit. He tightly gripped a floral bouquet. He was 30 years old, possessing dark hair and a radiant smile. The woman positioned beside him glowed in a pristine white wedding dress. She was 26 years old. Her delicate hand rested intimately upon the man's forearm. Arranged behind the couple upon the stone steps stood the vibrant bridal party. The bridesmaids were captured mid-laugh. The bride beamed directly into the camera lens. Standing immediately to the left of the beautiful bride, assuming the critical role of maid of honor, was a 6-year-old woman possessing brown hair and a vivid yellow dress. That specific maid of honor was Nancy Pelosi. Madam Speaker, Tulsi commanded, testify before this committee exactly whose wedding was celebrated on that day. Pelosi's hands trembled violently. The pearl necklace rattled with the kinetic energy. That is Joseph and Jill Biden. The 17th of June, 1977. You served as the esteemed maid of honor at Jill Biden's wedding ceremony, Madam Speaker. You were 37 years of age. You had maintained a close relationship with Joseph Biden for 5 solid years. You had known Jill Biden for 2. The profound friendship forged between the 4 of you, Paul, Nancy, Joe, and Jill, would weather the brutal storms of Washington for 47 consecutive years. Tulsi revealed a secondary photograph. This iteration captured in 2015. It depicted a somber funeral procession, Beau Biden's funeral, Street Anthony of Padua, in Wilmington, Delaware. The haunting image showcased a seemingly endless line of grief-stricken mourners winding outside the church architecture. Positioned near the absolute front of the line, swathed in a heavy black winter coat, stood Nancy Pelosi. She had urgently flown across the country from San Francisco that very morning to be present. Madam Speaker, you solemnly attended Beau Biden's funeral. You stood shoulder to shoulder with Joseph Biden in the freezing rain for 2 grueling hours. You personally authored a significant portion of his eulogy. You dialed him on the telephone every single Christmas morning for 47 years. You explicitly referred to Jill Biden as your literal sister inside your 2008 published memoir, a book we proudly maintain a copy of within this committee's extensive records. Specifically on page 241, she lifted a third document, a printed photocopy of Pelosi's memoir flipped open to the exact page referenced. I quote, "Madam Speaker, Joe acts as the brother I never possessed. Jill operates as the sister I never possessed. They have constituted my genuine family in Washington for as long as I have drawn breath here. They have remained present at every single birthday, every joyful wedding, every heartbreaking funeral. They transcend friendship. They are blood." End quote. Those are your exact words, published in 2008. She slammed the heavy book shut. Madam Speaker, throughout the month of July, in 2024, you utilized 11 days on the telephone to completely destroy your brother. The expansive room fell into a terrifying absolute silence. You refused to dial his number. You refused to physically visit his residence. You refused to utter a single syllable of this to his face. Instead, you coordinated with his political colleagues. You manipulated his elite donors. You orchestrated a pressure campaign with the editorial board of the New York Times. Over the span of 11 days, you ruthlessly engineered the absolute political assassination of the exact same man who had buried his beloved son directly inside your arms back in 2015. You entirely lacked the basic human decency to deliver the fatal blow to his face. Pelosi's lip quivered rapidly. No sound materialized. Tulsi Gabbard locked eyes with Nancy Pelosi, her voice steady but lethal as she prepared to deliver a final, undeniable reckoning. The replacement was on the verge of defeat when you sat down for an interview with the New York Times. Gabbard began, her tone measured and resonant. You stated, and I quote, "Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race." End quote. Tulsi allowed those words to hang in the silent room for 5 deliberate seconds. Madam Speaker, you shifted the blame entirely to him nearly 3 weeks before the electorate cast their ballots. Fully aware that Vice President Harris was campaigning on a platform of party unity, you publicly undermined the very man you had orchestrated to step aside. And you executed this maneuver 3 weeks prior to the election, fully cognizant of the catastrophic damage it would inflict upon her campaign. Madam Speaker, that was not a calculated political strategy. That was pure, unadulterated contempt. Pelosi stammered into her microphone, I never intended. I cherish Joe. I cherish Jill. Madam Speaker, Dr. Jill Biden has not uttered a single word to you since November the 5th, 2024. She has categorically rejected your phone calls. She has declined to be present at the same social engagements. She has avoided sharing a room with you for 15 agonizing months. This past January, she granted a solitary interview to the Washington Post. When the journalist inquired about your supposed friendship, she gave an answer I will now read into the record. Tulsi retrieved the article, though her eyes never left the woman across the well. Quote, "We were friends for 50 years. It was disappointing." End quote. She placed the paper back on the desk. Madam Speaker, notice the past tense. We're friends. Disappointing. The woman you affectionately referred to as a sister in your own memoir no longer considers you family. The progressive faction in the gallery, individuals adorned in AOC pins and labor union shirts, sat perfectly still, their hands folded rigidly in their laps. Tears had begun to trace down the cheeks of two attendees, weeping not in sympathy for Pelosi, but for Joe Biden, the aging statesman in Wilmington who had been summarily discarded by the woman who once stood beside his wife in her wedding gown. In the third row, a young black staffer wearing a Pelosi campaign pin abruptly stood and exited the hearing chamber. The broadcast cameras meticulously tracked her departure. Senator Schiff stared blankly at his hands. Pelosi reflexively reached for her signature pearls, twisting the silken thread as an audible groan escaped into the microphone. A second pearl broke loose. Two iridescent spheres now dangled precariously by the silk, swaying with her every tremor. Director, with all due respect, President Biden's decision was entirely his own. Madam Speaker, Tulsi countered, I have reviewed Senator Schiff's text messages from those pivotal 11 days. They are a component of the discovery materials this very committee subpoenaed. He transmitted the phrase, and I quote, "We have to push him out," end quote. On the 14th of July, he directed that specific phrase to you. You replied, quote, "Agreed. Working on it," end quote. You sent that confirmation to him at 1,117 at night on July 14th, while Joseph Biden was sound asleep in the executive residence at the White House, while Dr. Jill Biden was quietly reading in the yellow Oval Room. While they remained completely in the dark, Schiff buried his face in his hands. Madam Speaker, Donald Trump did not steal the 2024 election. You stole it from your own party. You stole it from the man who buried his son in your arms. Listener, if your heart breaks in this moment, if you recall the somber day in 2015 when Joe Biden laid his son to rest in the pouring rain while Nancy Pelosi stood solemnly beside him in that receiving line for 2 grueling hours, take a moment to reflect on the words, "the brother." Engage with this history, acknowledge the profound shift, and prepare yourself. The subsequent folder contains a moment America witnessed on live broadcast, an image eternally burned into the nation's memory. Directors note the red folder. The torn legacy, Tulsi, opened the fourth folder, a stark, vivid red. The cover bore a simple inscription, State of the Union, the 4th of February 2020, Joint Session. She did not produce a printed list. Instead, she extracted 4 distinct photographs. She arranged them on the polished table, one by one. The first image portrays a 100-year-old black man seated in a wheelchair. He was proudly wearing his vintage military uniform. His name was Charles McGee. He had flown 136 combat sorties during World War II alongside the legendary Tuskegee Airmen. Upon returning from the theater of war, he was explicitly told he was forbidden from eating at the lunch counter at the very airfield where he had trained. He had endured it all. He had watched his nation evolve. On the night this photograph was captured, he was seated in the gallery of the United States House of Representatives, watching the President of the United States announce his official promotion to the rank of Brigadier General. The second image features a 4-year-old black girl wearing a pink dress. Her name was Janiyah Davis. She resided in Philadelphia. Her devoted mother had ironed that dress twice that morning. Her mother had navigated 2 buses and a train to reach Washington. They were informed that Janiyah was receiving a scholarship. They were not informed it would be revealed live on national television. The little girl was resting on her mother's lap when the president spoke her name. The president awarded her a Federal Opportunity Scholarship to attend the precise academic institution her mother had been waitlisted for since Janiyah was merely 2 years old. The third photograph displays a Special Forces sergeant clad in his Class A uniform. His name was Townsend Williams. He had just concluded his 4th rigorous combat deployment to Afghanistan. He had been separated from his wife and 2 children for 7 long months. The president had secretly arranged for him to emerge from the cloakroom and surprise his family on a live broadcast. The captured image shows him firmly embraced by his 2 children. His wife rested her hand gently on his back. She was not looking toward the cameras. Her gaze was fixed entirely on her husband's face. She had believed he was still stationed in Kandahar. The 4th photograph depicts an older gentleman in a tuxedo alongside his wife. His name was Rush Limbaugh. A mere 2 days prior, his physician had informed him he possessed stage 4 lung cancer. He was given 6 months, perhaps a year, to live. That evening, he attended the State of the Union, utterly unaware that the president was about to award him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. His wife wept openly as the medal was draped around his neck. His hands trembled visibly. He passed away 14 months later. Tulsi meticulously aligned the 4 photographs in a perfect row across the expanse of the witness table. Madam Speaker, the night these 4 remarkable Americans were honored on the floor of the United States House of Representatives, you stood exactly 8 feet behind the President of the United States. As he concluded his address on live television before an audience of 40 million Americans, you tore that speech in half. She did not present the infamous photograph of the tearing. It was entirely unnecessary. Madam Speaker, I am not going to ask you why you destroyed that document. You have addressed that inquiry in numerous interviews. You stated it was, quote, the courteous thing to do, considering the alternative, end quote. I am going to ask you a distinctly different question. She gently tapped the photograph of Charles McGee. Madam Speaker, when you tore that speech, were you aware that one of the very pages you shredded announced the promotion of a heroic Tuskegee airman to Brigadier General? Pelosi stammered softly. I had not. I had not read the speech in advance. Madam Speaker, you possessed a physical copy. The Speaker is always provided a copy. The Speaker physically holds that copy throughout the duration of the address. The exact copy you tore is the exact copy you held. Pelosi offered no rebuttal. Madam Speaker, were you aware that one of the pages you destroyed awarded a federal scholarship to a 4-year-old black girl from Philadelphia? Utter silence. Tulsi tapped the photograph of Janiyah Davis. Madam Speaker, Janiyah Davis is 10 years old today. She still lives in Philadelphia. She attends a public charter school, the exact one her mother fought tirelessly to enroll her in. After the federal scholarship the president announced that evening was entangled in relentless litigation for 2 years. That litigation was initiated by the District of Columbia and Pennsylvania Attorneys General, both Democrats, who aggressively challenged the executive authority of the scholarship program. Madam Speaker, do you know what Janiyah Davis asked her mother in March of 2020, just 3 weeks after that broadcast? The silence deepened. She asked her mother, quote, "Did the lady not want me to go to school?" End quote. She was 4 years old. She did not comprehend the concept of a duplicate copy. She did not understand the nuances of political theater. What she inherently understood was that a woman on television tore up the page that carried her name. Pelosi cast her eyes downward toward the photograph of the little girl. Her gaze darted away almost instantly. Tulsi tapped the 3rd image. Madam Speaker, Sergeant Townsend Williams, Special Forces, 4th Combat Deployment. The page you tore detailed the surprise reunion with his beloved family. Were you aware? No response came. Tulsi tapped the final photograph. Madam Speaker, Rush Limbaugh, stage fire, lung cancer. The page you tore contained the Presidential Medal of Freedom announcement. He died 14 months after that night. His widow has spoken publicly regarding that evening precisely one time in the year 2023 on the Mike Gallagher radio program. I am going to read her exact words. Tulsi extracted a single sheet of paper from the red folder. Quote, Rush watched the broadcast that night from his hospital bed. He saw the speech being torn. He turned to me and said, "That woman just tore up the page that gave me a medal." Then he laughed. Because he was Rush. But I did not laugh. I knew he was dying. And the woman behind the president had just torn up the only public honor my husband would ever receive from the country he loved. He never spoke of it again. But I think about it every single day. End quote. Catherine Limbaugh, 2023. Tulsi lowered the paper to the desk. Madam Speaker, in your opening statement today, exactly 58 minutes ago, you condemned the Republican Party as a death cult. You labeled conservative voters as complicit in the rise of fascism. She swept her hand across the 4 photographs. Madam Speaker, a death cult does not promote a 100-year-old black military veteran. A death cult does not bestow a scholarship upon a 4-year-old black child. A death cult does not orchestrate the return of a sergeant from Afghanistan to his weeping children. A death cult does not gently place a medal around the neck of a dying patriot. She locked her gaze onto Pelosi. You performed the only tearing inside that chamber that night. The pearls, enduring their 5th agonizing twist, finally surrendered. 3 additional pearls snapped free from the thread. 5 pearls now hung suspended by the fraying silk, swinging violently with every breath the former speaker drew. Pelosi reached unsteadily for her water glass with her left hand, while her right hand remained desperately clutched at her throat. The glass hovered halfway to her lips before halting entirely. Her hand was trembling with uncontrollable force. She returned the glass to the table. Water sloshed over the rim, cascading across the polished witness desk and pooling directly around the 4 photographs. She made no effort to wipe it away. In the photograph, Janiyah Davis' vibrant pink dress slowly darkened, where the spilled water bled into the paper. Listener, if the memory of that February night in 2020 remains vivid, if you watched her shred those pages on live television and the image has never left you, brace for what comes next. It is the definitive strike. It is the very revelation she has spent 24 years dreading. Directors, note the top-secret file, the Langley briefing. Tulsi reached for the 5th folder. It was pitch black, bisected by a glaring red declassification stripe. The official seal of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence dominated the front cover. The document concealed within had been strictly classified as top secret for 24 years. She deliberately broke the 2nd security seal. Madam Speaker, we will now transition to the morning of the 4th of September, 2002. Pelosi's complexion visibly drained. The preceding rounds had inflicted damage. This round accomplished something far more profound. Madam Speaker, on the morning of the 4th of September 2002, you journeyed to the headquarters of the Central Intelligence Agency, situated in Langley, Virginia. You served as the ranking Democrat on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. You attended a highly classified briefing. That briefing was conducted by the Chief Counsel of the CIA Counterterrorism Center. The session spanned 95 minutes. The primary subject of the briefing was the rigorous interrogation of a captured terrorist identified as Abu Zubaydah. She paused for dramatic effect. Do you recall the nature of the discussion in that secure room, Madam Speaker? Pelosi whispered. I do not recall the specific. Madam Speaker, operating under the President's explicit authorization, this committee has fully declassified the official briefing log from that meeting. I am holding the original document in my hand. I am preparing to read it directly into the Congressional record. She elevated the document for all to see. The formidable top-secret stamp had been forcefully struck through with red ink. Madam Speaker, I am going to remind you of what was discussed in that subterranean room. I will utilize the precise language contained within the briefing log. I strongly suggest you brace yourself. At 914 inches the morning, the CIA chief counsel initiated the briefing by meticulously detailing the apprehension of Abu Zubaydah in March of 2002. He articulated Mr. Zubaydah's staunch resistance to standard interrogation protocols. He subsequently described, and the briefing log utilizes this exact phrasing, enhanced interrogation techniques to be authorized for use on the subject. End quote. He methodically listed the techniques. There were 10 inches total. The 10th listed technique was waterboarding. Tulsi kept her eyes firmly planted on the document. The briefing explored in granular detail the physical application of waterboarding, the specific board upon which the subject would be securely strapped, the precise angle at which said board would be tilted, the specific cloth that would obscure the subject's face, the volume of water to be poured, the exact duration, the frequency of application, the mandated medical monitoring during the grueling procedure, the physiological signs the interrogators were instructed to monitor, and the strict protocol for terminating the session if the medical officer determined the subject was experiencing severe cardiac distress. She turned the page with a crisp snap. The official briefing log states, quote, Pelosi, N, ranking minority member, HPSCI. Present throughout duration 95 minutes. Questions raised. None. Objections recorded. None. Concerns expressed about technique application. None. End quote. She firmly closed the black folder. Madam Speaker, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States waterboarded Abu Zubaydah 83 separate times during the month of August 2002. That waterboarding transpired in direct violation of the Convention Against Torture, an international treaty the United States ratified in 1988. The realities of waterboarding were described to you in excruciating detail exactly 1 month after the practice commenced. You raised absolutely no objection. You drafted no letter of protest. You informed no one within the ranks of your own party. You departed Langley, returned home, and maintained absolute silence on the matter for 7 long years. Pelosi stammered. I was assured by legal counsel that the methods— Madam Speaker, in April of 2009, a full 7 years later, when this horrifying story finally ruptured into the public press, you convened a press conference broadcast on national television. Standing before a sea of reporters, you stood at a podium within the walls of this very building. You stated, and I will recite your exact words, I was not told that waterboarding was being used. The CIA briefed us on legal opinions, not on actual practices. End quote. She smoothly extracted a secondary document from the folder. Madam Speaker, exactly 6 days following that press conference, your fellow Democrat, Director of Central Intelligence Leon Panetta, authored a letter to the United States Congress. He had previously served as White House Chief of Staff under Bill Clinton. He had been officially confirmed as CIA Director by Barack Obama. He possessed absolutely no political motivation to contradict you. Yet, he contradicted you nonetheless. I am going to read his letter. She held the single sheet aloft. Quote, the CIA records currently in our possession clearly indicate that Speaker Pelosi was briefed on the enhanced interrogation techniques in exhaustive detail in September of 2002. The records are highly accurate. The records reflect the absolute truth. End quote. Signed, Leon Panetta. The 15th of May, 2009. The document was lowered to the desk. Madam Speaker, you stood tall at a podium within this sacred building, flanked by cameras, speaking directly to the American people, and you brazenly lied to the entire nation regarding whether you knew the United States government was waterboarding detainees under your watch. The director of the Central Intelligence Agency, the director chosen by your own political party, thoroughly contradicted you on the official record. You have never issued an apology. You have never attempted to correct the public record. You have never once been held accountable. The hearing chamber plunged into a profound silence, a suffocating quiet that the earlier rounds of questioning had failed to evoke. It was the crushing silence of an audience that had not, until this very second, comprehended the full, unvarnished nature of the woman occupying the witness chair. Tulsi's voice dropped an octave, carrying a lethal gravity. Madam Speaker, you spearheaded the impeachment proceedings against Donald Trump in 2019, predicated entirely on the grounds that he could not be trusted to speak the truth to the American populace. The man you so vehemently claimed could not be trusted never lied about American torture. You did. On the public record, irrevocably confirmed by your own party's CIA director in 2009, 17 years ago, and you have never lifted a finger to make it right. In the front row of the gallery, Pete Hegseth slowly stood. He offered no verbal interjection. He strode purposefully across the well of the hearing chamber. Gripped firmly in his right hand was a solitary object. It was a pair of impeccably polished combat boots, standard military issue. A simple name tag was bound to the laces by a length of black mourning ribbon. He gently placed the heavy boots on the very edge of the witness table, a mere 6 inches from Nancy Pelosi. He stood rigidly beside the footwear. He refused to look at Pelosi. His unyielding gaze was fixed solely upon the chairman. Then, he finally spoke. Madam Speaker, these combat boots belong to Sergeant Howard Liebengood, an officer of the United States Capitol Police. Sergeant Liebengood maintained a top-secret security clearance. He meticulously read the after-action reports concerning the enhanced interrogation program back in 2007. When those deeply classified reports were briefed to Capitol Police senior personnel for the purposes of protective intelligence, Hegseth's voice was barely a whisper, yet it filled the room. On the 9th of January 2021, precisely 3 days following the assault on the Capitol building, Sergeant Liebengood tragically took his own life. 6 days prior to his passing, he confided in his wife, and I quote the official account she provided to the Department of Defense in October of 2024. I cannot understand how the people who knew, who truly knew, did absolutely nothing. End quote. He left the boots untouched. His grieving widow personally requested that I bring these boots to this chamber today. She stated, and these are her exact words, "Let her see them." End quote. I have fulfilled that duty. He turned on his heel, walked back to his designated seat, and sat down. Pelosi could not bring herself to look at the boots. Her eyes remained stubbornly welded to the wood of the table. Her hands remained concealed within her lap. The famous pearls and the silken thread that bound them, having endured 5 vicious rounds of nervous twisting, finally surrendered completely. The silk snapped with a loud, distinct crack. 26 luminous pearls cascaded freely onto the polished oak of the witness table. The first pearl struck the wood, swiftly followed by the second and the third. Then, an agonizing 100 milliseconds of pure silence. Then, 23 pearls rained down simultaneously. The audio captured on the C-SPAN broadcast was utterly unprecedented in the network's history. 26 pearls clattering violently against solid oak. Several rolled directly toward Pelosi. Others rolled inevitably toward the combat boots. 3 pearls careened off the edge of the table entirely. The television cameras vividly captured the first pearl bouncing sharply on the marble floor, then the second, then the third. Pelosi sat perfectly paralyzed for 9 agonizing seconds. Then she slowly raised her trembling hands to conceal her face. Listener, if you have journeyed this far, if you remain anchored to this historic testimony, stand witness to this narrative. The closing statement approaches. The silent standing is imminent. You are experiencing the unfolding of American history, a moment of such gravity that it will be recounted to generations yet unborn. Directors note the final reckoning and adjournment. Senator Cotton permitted the absolute silence to stretch for 15 long seconds. Then he tapped his wooden gavel softly. It was not intended to bring the room to order. The room was already suspended in perfect, breathless order. He tapped it merely to signify a transition. The committee will stand in recess for a duration of 15 minutes. Madam Speaker, upon our return, Director Gabbard will deliver her formal closing statement. You will then be afforded the opportunity to respond. We are officially in recess. The gavel struck with finality. Pelosi did not immediately rise. Her loyal staff hastily approached the witness table to assist her. Schiff stood, cast a lingering glance at her, and numbly sat back down. He was completely paralyzed by indecision. The scattered pearls littered the table. A young female aide began frantically collecting them, using both hands to sweep them into a manila envelope retrieved from her tote bag. She steadfastly refused to make eye contact with the surrounding cameras. The combat boots remained exactly where Hegseth had positioned them. Tulsi did not vacate her chair. She made no effort to assist with the manila envelope. She did not reach for her cellular device. She sat composed, her hands folded gracefully atop her combat journal, and simply waited. When the sharp crack of the gavel signaled the conclusion of the recess, Pelosi had returned to the witness table. She had changed her blouse. Her frantic staff had retrieved a fresh garment from an office down the corridor. The iconic pearls were entirely absent. Her hair had been hastily smoothed. Her makeup had been carefully retouched. Yet the distinct redness ringing her eyes remained glaringly visible to the high-definition cameras. She had wept openly in the recess chamber. 3 of her former speaker aides had wept alongside her. She was 85 years of age, and she was experiencing a profound, isolating loneliness she had not encountered in a half-century of politics. Schiff had vacated the witness table entirely. His presence had been substituted by her personal legal counsel, a high-powered private attorney from Williams & Connolly. Schiff had retreated to the second row of the gallery, his head bowed low in defeat. Cotton spoke clearly. Director Gabbard, you may proceed with your closing statement. Tulsi stood to her full height. She did not walk toward the witness table this time. She stood resolutely at the D&I desk, exactly 20 feet separating her from Pelosi, and projected her voice directly across the vast well of the hearing chamber. Madam Speaker, I presented myself here today, acting as the Director of National Intelligence, utilizing the explicit cross-examination authority granted by this esteemed committee. I arrived to interrogate you regarding an impeachment proceeding. You aggressively launched in 2019 an action predicated upon a whistleblower complaint that was artificially manufactured, utilizing second-hand rumors and deeply politically biased witnesses. Exactly 3 weeks ago, I formally declassified those underlying documents. The American public has now read them in their entirety. The foundational case for that impeachment, Madam Speaker, has completely collapsed. She paused, allowing the weight of the revelation to settle. I did not journey here to publicly litigate the actions of your husband, or the immense scope of your personal wealth, or the speech you destroyed, or the fractured remnants of your friendship with Joseph Biden, or the horrifying briefing you quietly sat through in the subterranean basement of CIA headquarters in 2002. She paused a second time. However, you chose to introduce the issue of credibility into this chamber, Madam Speaker. During your opening remarks, you branded me a Russian asset. You labeled me a traitor to this nation. You declared that I belonged in a prison cell. You weaponized the presumed credibility of your 40-year political career in an attempt to thoroughly discredit me before I had the opportunity to ask a single question. She shifted her stance, turning subtly toward the array of broadcast cameras. The American citizens listening tonight are now fully equipped to weigh that audacious claim against your husband's egregious drunk driving incident, occurring with another woman in your vehicle while you nonchalantly toasted dignitaries in Brussels. They can weigh it against the staggering discrepancy between a $3 million net worth and a $280 million fortune amassed on the exact same public servant's salary. They can weigh it against the 11 shadowy days in July when you meticulously orchestrated the political assassination of a man who once wept as he buried his son in your embracing arms. Against the 4 ceremonial pages you physically tore on national television simply because you could not stomach the reality that the man standing at the podium wore a red hat bearing your name. Against the dark morning at Langley, when you sat in passive silence through 95 minutes of brutal waterboarding briefings, only to stand before the flashing cameras 7 years later and brazenly lie about it, a lie so egregious that your own party's CIA director was forced to correct the public record. Her voice remained perfectly measured, never rising in volume. Madam Speaker, I am not going to stoop to calling you a Russian asset. I am not going to label you a fascist. I am not going to declare you a death cult. I am going to assign you the solitary label that the undeniable evidence contained within this folder thoroughly supports. She gently lifted the brown manila envelope. You are a once public servant who seamlessly transitioned into a private fortune. You are a self-proclaimed sister who ultimately transformed into a betrayer. You are a sworn guardian of the Constitution, who callously tore the Constitution's most widely photographed page on live television. You are an eyewitness, who lied directly to your own citizens about the torture conducted under the banner of their name. You are a Speaker of the House who quietly terminated an impeachment investigation 3 weeks ago. The moment declassified documents proved the entire endeavor was constructed upon a deliberate lie. She set the envelope down with quiet finality. Madam Speaker, your ultimate objective today was to put Donald Trump on public trial. Donald Trump is not present in this room. You are. And over the course of 2 hours, I have meticulously built the case against you, utilizing the evidence of your own scattered pearls, your husband's humiliating mugshot, your sprawling Napa Valley winery, the forgotten veteran on Market Street, the joyous wedding photograph dated June 17, 1977, the 4 torn pages from the 4th of February 2020, the damning briefing log from the 4th of September 2002, and Sergeant Liebengood's silent boots. She took one final breath. I conclude by quoting the sacred text upon which I swore my solemn oath as Director of National Intelligence, the Bhagavad Gita. Satyameva Jayate. Truth alone triumphs. Tulsi slowly sat down. For 5 breathless seconds, the massive hearing room failed to produce a single sound. Then, the woman seated in the wheelchair in the furthest row, Serena Liebengood, the grieving widow, stood up. Her gold memorial pin glinted sharply under the harsh overhead lighting. The military veterans assembled in the second row silently rose to their feet. The general gallery stood. The hardened press corps stood. Astonishingly, half of Pelosi's fiercely progressive supporters stood as well. There was absolutely no applause. Applause is strictly forbidden and entirely inappropriate within the confines of a Senate hearing room. There was merely the profound act of standing, 300 individuals entirely on their feet, wrapped in absolute silence. It was the ultimate appropriate honor bestowed upon a witness who had unflinchingly delivered the truth. While under the burden of oath, Adam Schiff slouched in the second row with his head bowed, refused to stand. Pelosi's trembling hands remained securely in her lap. She did not dare look up. Senator Cotton waited patiently until the silent ovation had run its full magnificent course. Then, he firmly tapped the gavel. The committee will officially receive Director Gabbard's submitted documents into the permanent congressional record. Madam Speaker, you are officially dismissed. This hearing is adjourned. The gavel struck with finality. Directors note the aftermath. The scattered pearls remained resting on the polished witness table, as did the heavy combat boots. The 4 photographs from February of 2020 had been carefully collected by the presiding clerk for preservation in the record. The spilled water on the table had fully evaporated, leaving behind nothing but a faint, ghostly stain, perfectly matching the shape of a child's pink dress. C-SPAN completely shattered its all-time single-day viewership record by 1100 that evening. The haunting photograph of the Liebengood boots, captured by a wire photographer crouching in the well of the hearing room, dominated the front page of every major newspaper in the nation by dawn. Pelosi's office hastily issued a brief statement at 6:15 the following morning. The Speaker remains entirely focused on her legacy work and will not respond to coordinated political theater. She abruptly canceled 4 consecutive weeks of scheduled public appearances. Her communication staff ceased responding to all press inquiries. By Thursday afternoon, Adam Schiff vanished from the press for 72 hours. On the 4th day, his confidential financial disclosure was mysteriously leaked to Politico. He immediately issued a formal statement announcing his retirement at the conclusion of his current congressional term. Dr. Jill Biden posted a single, solitary word on social media at 342 inches the morning, exactly 6 hours after the hearing's conclusion. Truth, she did not post again for the remainder of the week. Pete Hegseth uploaded one profound photograph at 700 the following morning to the Department of Defense's official account. The stark image featured the abandoned witness table, the scattered pearls, the silent boots, the lingering water stain. There was absolutely no accompanying caption. Senator Cotton publicly announced the following Monday that the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence would officially reopen the investigation into the 2002 CIA briefing, boasting the full cooperation of Director Panetta, who had formally agreed to provide testimony. Janiyah Davis' mother granted one final interview to the Philadelphia Inquirer that ensuing Sunday. She confirmed that her young daughter had watched the entirety of the broadcast. When the reporter asked what Janiyah had said in response, the mother answered softly. She said, "The lady cried." She said, "Maybe the lady is sorry now." I looked at her and told her, "Baby, sometimes sorry comes much too late." Tulsi quietly returned to the office of the Director of National Intelligence. She granted absolutely no interviews to the press. The scattered pearls were meticulously collected by Capitol janitorial staff at the conclusion of their daily shift. There were 26 inches total. They were respectfully placed inside a small plastic evidence bag and officially surrendered to the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms. Their ultimate disposition remains absent from the public record. There was no formal expulsion. There was no official resignation. There were no looming criminal charges. There were only the immutable records. And the records simply do not unredact.